They mocked me when I dropped out of the Air Force ROTC program at Ohio State, said I didn't have the discipline, the fire, the follow-through. My own sister Kendra used to laugh and call me desk duty material, like it was some kind of insult. At family dinners, they passed around her medals and skipped over me like I was a chair that didn't belong at the table. Even after I quietly enlisted years later, no Facebook post, no proud family goodbye, they treated me like I was chasing a phase. She's still figuring herself out, my aunt once whispered. But last fall, standing on the training field at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, boots heavy with dirt and promotion orders tucked in my coat, I saw Kendra leading a fresh squad through drills. She didn't notice me until her drill sergeant halted, mid-step stiffened, and asked quietly. General Wilcox, ma'am. Silence slammed down like thunder. Kendra turned. Her expression crumbled from indifference to disbelief. For the first time, she didn't see me as Jessica, the dropout, the family footnote, but as someone she never took the time to ask about. She didn't know about the years I spent on covert deployments, the calls I made that saved lives, the grief I buried for the sake of mission and flag. And now, the sister who once called me a quitter had to salute me. But that's not where this begins. I'm Jessica Wilcox. I'm 39. And for years, I stayed silent about where I went, who I became, and why I left the only home I ever knew. Today, I'm ready to speak. Before I go on, let me know you're with me. Drop a listening in the comments, or just say where you're tuning in from. Every voice matters. Every connection reminds me that I'm not invisible anymore. If this story touches you, I hope you'll subscribe. Thank you for being here. Now here's where it really starts. I pulled into my parents' driveway in Dayton just after 6 p.m. The porch light flickered like always. The Wilcox mailbox still leaned left, like Dad's political rants. Mom's text had been blunt as ever, Kendra's promotion dinner. Don't wear anything weird. Not, how are you? Not, we miss you. Just another order like I was still 19 and living under their roof. Inside, the scent of overcooked brisket and dollar store wine filled the air. The dining room looked like a recruiter's dream, blue streamers, laminated programs, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Kendra Wilcox." Nobody looked up when I walked in. Not even Kendra. I wore a plain gray button-up. No shine, no stripes, just neutral enough to blend in, but I never really blended in this house. I was background noise familiar, but uninvited. Dad was the first to acknowledge me. "So, what are you doing these days?" he asked flatly, already turning his attention back to Kendra before I could even open my mouth. He launched into a story about her top evaluations in tactical leadership, beaming with pride. Across the table, Aunt Marlene, 2 glasses of Pinot in, smirked. "Didn't you used to play waitress when you were little, Jessie? Looks like you stuck with it, huh?" She laughed then, sipped without waiting for a reply. I smiled, polite, precise. "I've gotten better at performing," I said smoothly. It landed. A clean, quiet strike, polished enough to pass as casual, sharp enough to sting later. When the toasts began, the entire table lifted their glasses to Lieutenant Kendra Wilcox. Then someone glanced around and said, "We're short on forks. Jessie, would you mind grabbing more?" No one volunteered to go with me. No one asked if I minded. It was just assumed I was the extra. The leftover, the failure still trying to prove herself. I stood and moved through the motions like muscle memory. Fetch, pour, breathe. As I set the utensils back on the table, I thought of the night I walked out of this house 10 years ago after a breakdown that went unnoticed. Not one person asked why I gave up my full-ride ROTC scholarship at Ohio State. They called it flakiness, immaturity, weakness. What they didn't know was that 3 weeks later, I was recruited into a shadow program, military intelligence. My records erased. My name buried behind numbers and aliases. Not a disappearance. A disappearance with purpose. Back at the table, I hesitated. No chair was left for me. Each seat had a little name card except one. Mom blinked when she noticed me standing. "Oh, right. You can sit by the grill. There's a folding chair out on the porch." So I did. Outside, next to the humming propane tank, the metal seat cold against my spine. Through the kitchen window, I watched Kendra laugh with our cousin, her posture sharp, her voice crisp. She looked at me once just briefly. Not cruel, not warm, but uncertain, like even she didn't understand what my presence stirred in her. Then came the message. I felt the buzz, first subtle sharp against my hip, from a device no one in that house would recognize. A slim, encrypted receiver tucked deep inside the inner lining of my coat. I carried it like I carried my past quietly, constantly, and mostly forgotten until it called me back. I tapped the screen. Report to Fort Irwin. Observer detail. Security Council oversight. The corners of my mouth lifted into the first real smile of the night. I powered down the device, slid it back into its hidden pocket, and let my gaze drift to the family photo hanging crookedly by the fireplace. Kendra in her dress blues. My parents standing proudly beside her at some awards banquet. Smiles framed in gold. Joy frozen in time, but not one photo of me. Not a single square inch of that memory wall made room for Jessica. And yet, I didn't mind. Because someday, when the world saluted me for who I truly was, this house would need a new arrangement, one that couldn't ignore me. By the time I reached Fort Irwin, the desert was waking. Dawn unfurled gold across the Mojave sky, and fine sand kicked into the air with each barked command. Boots pounded in perfect time. The cadence echoed like a hymn of fire and steel. I parked just outside the live training range and entered through the side gate wearing a tailored black field jacket, tactical gray slacks, and a plain badge clipped to my lapel. No rank, no unit. Just a serial-locked encryption key, one only 3 people on base could read. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to observe. Kendra's unit stood lined up on the red clay backs, straight eyes front. Drill Sergeant Victor Brannick, the same one who once shredded a full-bird colonel for stepping off cadence, paced the line like a storm with legs. His voice cracked the morning air, sharp and unforgiving. I settled into the second row of the guest bleachers behind 2 defense contractors and a sleepy admin assistant scrolling her phone. Then Brannick saw me. He froze mid-stride. His jaw clenched. And without a word, he turned and marched straight toward me. Every pair of eyes followed. He stopped 2 feet in front of me, snapped to attention, and saluted clean. "General Wilcox, ma'am. I wasn't briefed. You'd be in attendance." The air stiffened. Kendra's practice rifle slipped from her hands and clattered to the concrete. Someone near her whispered, "Wait, her sister's a general?" I didn't flinch. "I'm here off duty," I said calmly. "Keep it quiet, Sergeant." Brannick's eyes flicked sideways. He nodded once sharp-clipped and pivoted without a word. No explanation. Not to the ranking captain behind him. Not to the murmuring officers. Certainly not to Kendra. Drills resumed. But the energy on the field had shifted. Glances flicked toward the bleachers. Whispers cut through formation like dry wind through prairie grass. By mid-morning, I'd exited quietly through the side gate. My presence had ended, but the fallout hadn't. Word spread faster than any memo could contain. Conversations churned across barracks and mess halls. An unlisted general. A ghost from a program that doesn't exist. The woman Brannick saluted without hesitation. Suddenly, Kendra Wilcox wasn't just the promising lieutenant. She was the sister of someone untouchable. That night, Kendra sat on her bunk at Bravo Company's quarters, her roommate snoring softly above her. Her cheeks still burned from the day's onslaught. "Is your sister in Black Ops? Was that real? Are you even allowed to talk to her?" She didn't have answers. She barely had questions. She had always thought of me as the weak one, the girl who cracked under pressure, who walked away from everything when things got hard. But now she wasn't so sure. After lights out, something compelled her to reach under her bed. She pulled out the old olive duffel I'd handed her a year ago, dropped it off with no explanation, like it held nothing but spare gym clothes and faded regrets. She'd never opened it, never cared to. Tonight, curiosity gnawed. Her fingers slipped into a stitched seam she hadn't noticed before. Inside was a flat digital drive barely the size of a dog tag. She plugged it into her tablet. Her breath hitched. The screen blinked, restricted. ShadowNet clearance required. She hesitated, then typed in her cadet ID temporary clearance level. The screen paused, a brief flicker, Then, "Welcome, Kendra Wilcox." Just as quickly, the screen went dark. Across the base, in a sterile guest suite tucked behind the southern barracks, my encrypted tablet lit up in warning. Not a routine ping, not a case file drop. Level 4 protocol breach, full spectrum trace in progress. Red alerts pulsed across the screen like open wounds. I sat still in the silence. Dry Mojave air hung in the room like chalk dust. But my mind had already left. Something was wrong. Something had begun. I pulled the encrypted receiver from the wall safe, tucked behind a decoy HVAC panel, and entered the decryption sequence. The screen blinked awake, cold and clinical. "Unauthorized access detected." One phrase pulsed in harsh digital font that made my stomach drop. "Origin internal node. Profile. Tag Wilcox Alpha." My blood ran still. Wilcox Alpha. That tag hadn't surfaced in over a decade. It had once been mine, my operational alias, back in the Alderson React initiative, before I transitioned to strategic command. That profile had been scrubbed, wiped, sealed in black memory banks, never meant to see daylight again. Yet, here it was, active. And the access hadn't come from ShadowNet's perimeter. It originated inside Fort Irwin. Someone had unknowingly tripped a ghost system. And in doing so, they triggered a secondary protocol. I helped design one, so buried even central systems couldn't track it. A failsafe tied to the oldest classified node in the Alderson program. A fragment of a locked file, had flickered through a diagnostic buffer. Just long enough to wave a flag. Just long enough to alert me. When I arrived at the off-grid command station, the air was thick with static and recycled ozone. Major Cecilia Penn waited at a narrow steel table. Her uniform was flawless, her hair wound into a tension wire bun. She didn't rise. She didn't smile. Just a mechanical pen click, and the quiet thud of the door locking behind me. "General Wilcox," she said flatly. "We logged an irregular access event. The ID tag is linked to your prior deployment designation." "I'm aware," I replied calmly, "but it wasn't me." "You'll understand if that's not sufficient," she said. "The trigger linked to a latent Alderson React subroutine. I designed it," I answered. Steady, unapologetic. Her jaw tightened, which is exactly what concerns me. Silence stretched between us, taut as wire. Finally, I leaned forward just enough to shift the energy in the room. "I'm not here to debate Major. I'm here to investigate. Give me the trace logs. I'll find the breach myself." Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "You want to lead an inquiry into your own clearance violation?" "No," I said. "I want to know who just exhumed a digital grave we buried 8 years ago and why they knew where to dig." A pause. Then finally, a nod. I walked out with a temporary admin token, full access to ShadowNet diagnostics, and 36 hours before the Joint Command audit dropped like a hammer. I already had a theory. Back in my suite, I initiated a silent scan on the metadata attached to the triggered access point. The fingerprint was fragmented, scrubbed hastily, sloppily, but something about the encryption rhythm, the ID cadence. It was familiar. It had been generated from a field device I hadn't seen in years. One of the old gray-issue comm drives standard for deep field recon. I'd stashed it in a duffel years ago, the same one I handed to Kendra last year. My stomach twisted. She had no idea what she'd touched. No clue what protocol she'd woken up. That bag had seemed like nothing, just an old gym duffel from a sister she barely understood. But that didn't matter now. The system didn't care about intent. It only cared about contact. And contact in this case didn't mean embarrassment. It meant audit flags, declassification risks, and potential exposure of active ops in 3 global regions. I should have reported her. I didn't. Instead, I opened an encrypted back channel to Brannick, one of the few officers I trusted implicitly. No politics, no ego, just a clean service record and a habit of keeping backups from old deployments. I kept the message short, surgical requesting archived network logs, firewall echo files, level 3 encryption, personal archive pull. Then I added one more line before sending, "This wasn't accidental. Someone wants me exposed, not compromised, exposed." I sent it, then braced for the storm. In Fort Irwin's digital forensics lab, the lights didn't flicker. They never did. The air was clinical, pressurized. The hum of filtered servers and recycled air carried that odd government sterility, soulless, but precise. I'd been given provisional authority over the breach inquiry, a gesture to my rank, not my reputation. That was fine. I didn't need their respect. I needed their systems. And I had them. Brannick stood beside me, now arms folded, eyes tracking every screen like he was still hunting insurgents. He didn't ask questions. He trusted my gut. That was his strength. Layer by encrypted layer, I peeled the trace apart until I found the artifact I expected. The Alderson React file hadn't been breached, just brushed. Not detonated, just awakened. And the signal, it came from a temporary issue tablet. One I'd assigned Kendra during last month's Red Canyon training sim. Nothing classified, nothing permanent. Except she kept it. And she used it. I didn't go to her barracks. I called her in. She stepped into the room with rigid posture, uncertainty in her eyes. Her gaze flicked between me and Brannick, who gave a slight nod. No warmth, no warning, just the beginning of consequences. I motioned to the seat across from me. "Sit down." Kendra obeyed, stiff and silent. "I didn't waste time. You don't need to explain." "Not yet. But you do need to understand what you accessed wasn't just sensitive. It was federal." Her lips parted slightly, like she might interrupt. I raised a hand. That device was linked to a retired clearance. Using it even unknowingly crossed a boundary we can't ignore. The system doesn't care if it was an accident. Kendra swallowed hard. Her face betrayed confusion and fear in equal measure. "This isn't a technical hiccup," I continued. "From this moment forward, if you're not with me, you're a liability. And that makes this a criminal investigation." Silence settled in the room, heavy and humming. I could hear the soft tick of the biometric lock system embedded in the wall. Then, barely above a whisper, "You're a general." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's real." I didn't respond. She leaned in slowly. "You never told us." "Not once." "You never told me?" Her eyes were searching for something I wasn't sure I had left to give. "I just wanted to know," she added, "how much of you we never saw." My reply came out lower than intended. "Sometimes, hiding is the only way to survive when no one wants to see you." Her shoulders slumped. She didn't argue. "That was new. I didn't report her." Instead, I said, "You're coming with me. You're going to help clean this up." "Personally." Brannick stood behind her, arms folded like stone. He didn't nod, didn't move, just watched. "If she screws this up," he said finally, "neither of you's walking back into command." "I know," I replied. So we moved as three, not out of trust, but necessity. We tore through server logs, dissected dormant packet trails, and scraped through 5 years of buried digital echoes. Hours passed. Finally, we found it. A ghost signature. A worm implanted 5 years ago, hidden inside low-traffic server sectors, deep enough to avoid detection, smart enough to reroute any trace attempts. The encryption pattern, I knew it instantly. Croft, Nathan Croft. Once a rising star in tactical ops until his fall after a botched Kuwait mission. Officially reassigned for protocol violations. Unofficially bribery. Data siphoning. Quiet sabotage. And now, one of his bombs had gone off. Brannick exhaled slowly. "This wasn't random." "No," I said. "This started 5 years ago. And it goes way deeper than Kendra." She had tripped a wire. But the minefield, it had been here the whole time. On the way back from the forensics lab, Brannick finally broke the silence. His eyes stayed forward, hands in his jacket pockets, like he was just walking across any base in the world, not the epicenter of a ticking disaster. "There was this night," he began, "near the Asher Ridgeline. Young unit, barely trained, 7 recruits, none over 19. Caught between 2 forward positions during a recon sweep. Crossfire from both sides. Command ordered a fallback." He paused, then added, She didn't listen. My head tilted. Kendra's eyes snapped toward him. "Your sister?" he said, nodding at me, signed an override on her own. No backup. Went back for them with just 2 medics. Brought all 7 out alive. Kendra's jaw tightened. Her stare shifted. No anger this time, just realization. Like the version of me that had walked into our parents' house was peeling away, and what was underneath, she didn't recognize it. Back in the command suite, we reviewed the last line of the trace report. Source node, server C17. Last administrator Encroft. Status transferred. Clearance redacted. The game had changed. This wasn't about Kendra anymore. It was about who'd left the door open and why they wanted me to walk through it. The hum of the server room dulled behind the sealed door. Outside, the desert sun climbed toward noon, but inside Fort Irwin, time moved to the rhythm of encrypted packets and glowing terminal screens. Kendra sat across from me, her posture alert now, not defensive. Watching, listening. Brannick leaned against the console, arms crossed the silent observer. I turned toward her. "You want to know who Croft is?" I asked. She nodded. I pulled up a classified case archive I hadn't touched in 5 years. Winter 2018, Southeastern Europe. Embedded with Sentinel Group Canderline, strategic containment along unstable borders. Croft was lead ops. On paper, a star. Medals. Citations. I paused. But underneath, ruthless. Control obsessed. Thought every civilian might be an infiltrator. Kendra leaned forward, brows furrowed. "There was a village," I said. Intel said 1 informant. Croft didn't wait. He ordered a full sweep. Her eyes widened. "Civilians." I nodded, jaw tight. The image still burned behind my eyes. "I refused," I said. Told him I'd go to DC if he didn't stand down. I stared at the screen. He did it anyway. If you're still with me, it means you see what others chose to ignore, so don't miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe and I'll take you deeper. Kendra's jaw tensed. "And you reported him." "I did," I said. 3 days later, he was reassigned. Quietly, but permanently. The fast track to generalship gone. His entire career torched. She blinked. "And he blamed you." I nodded. For lighting the match. Silence pressed down like gravity. Even Brannick didn't speak. But Croft wasn't the type to burn quietly, I continued. He didn't just disappear. He embedded something on the way out. A dormant script buried in the mission logs from that 2018 operation. Low level. Hidden in the backup framework. Unnoticeable, Kendra whispered, voice cracking, until someone triggered it. I nodded again. "You didn't cause it. You were the spark, but he built the minefield." The room dimmed as I exited the archive. For a moment, we hovered in that strange space between past and present, between memory and consequence. Then Brannick cleared his throat and handed me a printed log. "You'll want this." It was a civilian contractor roster pulled from the perimeter access logs around Fort Irwin. One name stood out. Not the name itself, Elijah N. Ryder, but the birth date. It matched Croft's military file. Alias, perfectly legal, paper thin. He was working just miles outside the base, listed as a consultant for a privately funded tactical AI development team. Far enough to dodge formal review. Close enough to watch. "He's back," I muttered, using a new name, using me as a shadow. Kendra's face drained of color. "What do we do?" Brannick turned to her slowly, the way he did with recruits dangling between failure and breakthrough. "You want redemption," he asked. "You want to stop being a girl playing soldier with borrowed clearance." She straightened, bristling. "Then answer me. This. Do you want a perfect record? Or do you want to do what's right? Because the woman you've resented for years just protected your future?" And said nothing. Kendra lowered her gaze. No argument, no deflection, just a quiet breath, a subtle shift in posture. The beginning of something unspoken. I turned away and tapped the secure port built into the far corner of the console. An old comm line, one I hadn't used since the last time I walked away from covert service. I typed the message slowly, with care. The ghost is back. He's using my shadow, and I'm ready to finish this. I hit send. The silence afterward didn't feel empty. It felt like the breath right before a storm tears down everything in its path. The room stank of overworked circuits and stale coffee. Midnight had come and gone, but none of us moved. The tech hub at Fort Irwin glowed in low blue light command terminals, humming like a nervous heartbeat. It wasn't just tension. It was anticipation. Collapse. The kind you can feel just before it hits. Data flooded the main screen numbers code variables, unraveling at speeds I hadn't seen in a decade. I leaned closer. That's not just a spike, I said. That's a breach protocol. Then it hit. Lines of code replicated like wildfire, shredding compartmentalized firewalls in real time. It wasn't random. It was surgical. The target's strategic defense outlines. Old ones, ghost protocols, but still active in SIM frameworks. Every file carried my name, my approval, my old command signature, tied to missions they'd buried deep. The implication was clear. Someone was painting me as a traitor. The overhead light switched to red. Then the alert came through. Effective. Immediately, General Jessica Wilcox. Access revoked. Tier 1 internal threat classification initiated. I didn't flinch. Brannick tensed, jaw clenched, but said nothing. Kendra looked from me to the screen, her face tight. Then she moved, quick, with purpose. She stepped out into the adjacent corridor where a panel of senior officers was already assembling, drawn by the red-level alerts. She didn't pause, didn't glance back. I did it, she said, her voice clear. The initial breach, the file pull, that was me. A murmur rippled through the room. I used an old device Jessica gave me. She continued. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was opening. I wanted answers. A beat passed, and I was stupid. The room fell still, eyes fixed on her. Her shoulders didn't drop. Her voice didn't waver. And I saw it, that raw, unshaped fire in her. The one I always knew she had, but had never seen burn for something real. I used to think she resented me, that she blamed me for walking away from the family, from the flags, from all of it. But now, I saw the truth. She'd just never known why I left. And now, she was willing to carry the fallout. For once, someone else stood still in the storm beside me. I looked at Kendra, not as a liability to manage, not as a younger sister who had once resented me, but as the first person in years who had seen the price I paid without demanding a receipt. Then the console blared again. Another breach. But this time, it wasn't internal. External, uplink. The virus had shifted. It was no longer just extracting files, it was targeting secondary command pathways. Simulated drone control systems. War games. Croft had been waiting for this moment. He'd used Kendra's accidental access as his gateway, and now he was reaching for control over an entire autonomous exercise grid. This isn't over, I muttered, already moving. My access was locked, but not my knowledge. Some doors. They were never written down. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small secured drive, the same one I built during the old Canderline assignment. A mirrored backup from a forgotten subnet, buried and patched with a line of code Croft had never seen. I plugged it into an unassigned terminal, bypassing the Fort Irwin mainframe entirely. Manual override. My fingers moved on instinct, old rhythms long buried. The screen flickered, then split 2 ports. One real, one bait. I launched a Phantom command shell, a decoy system built to mimic real drone operations, while feeding Croft nothing but noise. The virus, hungry for control, latched onto it. And there he was. His remote interface blinked to life. Croft had exposed himself. He was running the sweep directly now. Got you, I whispered. The trace pinged back instantly to a local IP just outside the base perimeter. Civilian housing block. Brannick didn't hesitate. Move. Within minutes, Fort Irwin security. Civilian enforcement and tactical backup stormed the location. Croft was found operating out of a dim basement. No guards, no escape plan. Just him, surrounded by blinking drives, signal splitters, and racks of stolen clearance data. As they cuffed him, he turned and smiled. Empty. Calculated. "You still think conscience is enough to survive?" he asked. "You should have stayed forgotten." I stepped in low enough for only him to hear. "Forgotten people don't trigger kill switches. They don't rewrite the rules." He laughed dry and bitter. But it didn't matter anymore. He was finished. And for the first time in years, I felt something beyond relief. I felt ready. The room chilled not from the temperature, but from the gravity of what had just been stopped. And what might come next. The tribunal convened inside the Fort Irwin West Command Hall, a vaulted chamber lined with wood-paneled walls and shadowbox relics from wars long archived. A quiet shrine to discipline and history. At the front sat Colonel Reeves, flanked by a military intelligence liaison and 2 senior officers from the Cyber Warfare Division. Their eyes were sharp, their expressions carved from stone, and every one of them was locked on me. Kendra sat to my left shoulders, square jaw clenched. Brannick stood near the testimony stand, arms folded, face unreadable as ever. Nathan Croft, now in civilian clothes, still carried the stench of a uniform long abused. He had already begun spinning his version of the past, holding up a printed after-action report from Operation Candorline. "In this section," he said, tapping the page, "you'll notice a communication gap. During that period then, Major Jessica Wilcox failed to report non-combatant casualties." He let the words float like smoke. The implication that I had covered up civilian deaths to protect my spotless file. The very thing I had once accused him of. "General Wilcox," Colonel Reeves said. "Your response?" I didn't blink, didn't look away. Instead, I handed a laminated scan to the clerk. Croft's own signature, final directive, time-stamped, clearance perimeter order. "He wrote this," I said evenly. "He authorized clearance without visual field verification." Then cut the comms. He knew what would happen and made sure it couldn't be stopped. A heavy silence followed. The kind that swells before truth lands like a hammer. Then Brannick stepped forward. "Permission to submit digital audio," he said. Reeves nodded. The speakers clicked. My voice filled the hall, 5 years younger, but resolute. "Hold fire. There are heat signatures matching civilians. Wait for recon confirmation before proceeding." There it was. The order Croft had tried to bury. A breath caught somewhere in the room. Croft leaned back. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. But it wasn't over. Kendra stood. In her hands, a printed access log. "This shows activity from Mr. Croft logged under an alias while registered as a civilian advisor at Fort Irwin," she said clearly. "He accessed restricted simulation code 2 years ago. That's when he planted the Trojan. That's what triggered the breach last week." Croft didn't smile this time. He didn't speak. For the first time since this began, he listened. He hadn't just wanted sabotage. Croft wanted revenge. The silence that followed his exposure was thicker than anything that had come before. It was no longer tension. It was weight, gravity, a reckoning. Colonel Reeves turned back toward me. Voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "General Wilcox, why didn't you report what you did at Candor? You could have been decorated." I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze forward. Because when survival depends on shadows, I said I'd rather stay in them than drag others into the light. Just so someone can take a picture. That silence changed. It softened. Turned from judgment into understanding. Major Penn, the intelligence liaison, nodded slowly. Deliberate. Respectful. By unanimous vote, the charges were dismissed. My clearance reinstated. My rank reaffirmed. Then came something I never expected: an invitation to deliver the keynote at the upcoming Strategic Cyber Defense Summit. As I stood, someone asked if I wanted a public statement released to clear my name in the press. I shook my head. If I'm stepping into the light, I said, let it be for truth. Not for forgiveness I never asked for. The hall didn't applaud. They didn't need to. A few weeks later, I walked onto the main stage at Fort Walker's command center. 300 faces watched me step forward. cyber warfare specialists, active duty officers, academy cadets, reporters. Not one flashbulb. They all understood. I wore my formal dress blues, polished, pressed, but I left the medals in their case. Behind me, projected onto a black screen, was a single line of white text: "Courage in the shadows, surviving digital war and old ghosts." I didn't open with my rank, or a thank you, or a biography. I simply said, "I've never failed." I just chose to live where no one claps for doing the right thing. Something shifted. You could hear spines straighten. Then I told them, not about Canderline as a place, not the unit names or coordinates. I told them about the decisions, about the moment I saw a child's heat signature in a window and said the one word Croft hated most: wait. I told them what that word cost: glory, advancement, recognition. And what it saved: 17 lives. I didn't dress it up. I laid it bare. I told them silence isn't cheap, but sometimes it's the only armor that keeps others alive. And then I saw her, Kendra. First row, informal cadet blues, a slim binder in her lap. Kendra sat in the front row, eyes steady, back straight. Her proposal detailed a full-scale overhaul of the military's cyber defense training modules using the very breach she had once triggered as the core case study. She didn't smile, but she nodded. At the end of my keynote, I scanned the crowd. "There's someone else who should speak," I said. "Because the future of leadership isn't about who gets remembered. It's about who chooses to remember." I called her forward. Kendra's hands trembled, but her steps didn't falter. "I used to believe the person who stood tallest deserved the most praise," she said, voice clear. "But I was wrong. It's the ones who kneel, who shield others when no one's watching. They're the ones who deserve to be remembered." Her voice cracked just once. After the ceremony, Major Penn approached with a manila envelope. Inside, the formal declassification request for Operation Canderline. If I signed it, my name and the names of my unit would be entered into the official archive. Recognition, legacy, risk. Penn didn't pressure me. He simply asked, "Do you want your name carved in stone, or your team's names carved into a list of collateral?" I looked at the folder, then handed it back. "I won't burn others just to light my own name," I said. "We survived together. Let them keep surviving in peace." As I stepped off the stage, Kendra met me at the stairs. From her pocket, she pulled out a small silver pin. Unofficial, handmade, a quiet symbol passed between those who chose people over medals. She pinned it to my lapel and whispered, "Instead of carving your name in stone, I think we should carve it into memory." I was the first to carry it. 3 days later, I was summoned to a secure room at the Pentagon. Penn was there, alongside a Joint Chiefs liaison. On the table sat a folder sealed with a Department of Defense crest. "We want to honor you," Penn said. "The real story of candor, your name, your image, national recognition, General Stanton, the one who once blocked every mention of candor, added, you'd be a symbol, not just a soldier." I asked one question. "If I agree, will my team be exposed?" Silence. Then Stanton nodded. "There's risk. Encryption only goes so far." I saw Dawson's face alive because I disobeyed. Still in Ohio, still free. Instead of answering, I handed them a sealed letter addressed to every U.S. military academy. If the next generation needs a story, I said this is the one they should hear. But not with my name attached. Inside the letter I had written, "When recognition requires a spotlight, maybe we've forgotten why we chose the shadows in the first place." On my way out of the Pentagon, I passed a young cadet in an ROTC uniform. She was seated on a bench, scrolling through a transcript of my summit speech on her phone. She glanced up, her eyes moving past me without recognition, and I smiled. In the car, I read the message from Kendra. "You're not a legend. You're the reason I still believe in doing what's right." I whispered to no one but myself, I don't need a stage. I just need to know I stayed true to why I stood up in the first place. A week later, I stood on a quiet tarmac in Spokane. The sun low, the cold biting through my coat. A C-130 hummed as its engines cycled through pre-flight. Another unnamed mission. No ceremony, no send-off. Just how I preferred it. Kendra appeared sharp in her uniform. No makeup, just the silver pin on her chest, the one she gave me, now worn with quiet pride. She handed me a small box wrapped in faded uniform cloth. Inside my old Phoenix Command insignia, polished, restored. "I don't want to wear it," she said. "I want to live up to it." I held it in my palm, the metal cool against my skin. I thought of General Stanton's quiet words the day I walked away from the light. "We carry no names, only silence and trust." Kendra saluted me for the first time. I responded not with a salute, but with a firm embrace. No words, no tears, just the wind across the runway carrying the memory forward. Before boarding, I left her a letter tucked inside her field journal. "Open this only if you forget who you are." On the plane, I pulled out an old photo, our unit standing in the snow. No clear faces, just a single line written across the back. Honor doesn't come from being seen. It comes from keeping your promise even when no one remembers you made it. As the jet lifted, the radio crackled, "Mission verified." Code Phoenix. I closed my eyes, thumb resting on the insignia. No medals, no applause, just one quiet truth: I'm still walking the path I chose. Because real strength doesn't shout, it endures, it forgives, and it walks away in peace. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Not just what you think of my story, but what you do in my boots. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in the shadows? What would you stand for when no one's watching? Because this story isn't just about missions or medals, it's about choosing integrity when silence is the harder path. Tell me what honor means to you. Share your advice for staying grounded in a noisy world. And if my story moved you even a little, let me know. It reminds me why I still walk this path.